name is Sam. Thanks for checking out this video. If you get to the end and liked it, then give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe, and the bell notification button. This is part 2 of Sunday's video, just because I took last Sunday off, so I had more books to cover. Yeah. So, these are the other books that I read in the last 2 weeks, and let's talk about them. So first off, I read House of Furies by Madeleine Roux. This is the first book by Madeleine Roux that I've ever read, but I picked this up at Value Village, and I also picked up her Asylum and what's the other one called? Catacomb book. I have one more book I think in that trilogy I have to pick up, and I know this has 3 books total. I know they did a cover change, but it was like $3 for the book, okay? And it's in perfect, like absolutely perfect condition. There's no dents, there's no nothings anywhere, and I actually think I prefer this. The other one looks more like A Madness So Discreet, the new covers for this series. Looks like A Madness So Discreet, and that's more of a historical fiction mystery rather than like a horror thriller gothic thing, so I feel like they should have stuck to this. But I read it, and I'm not a reader of general gothic or like darker horror-y sort of stuff. This is actually really enjoyable. It also added to the ambiance that I read it mostly I read it all with audiobook. A good chunk of it I didn't have the book with me. It was while I was driving. And if you don't know, they're like opposed for some reason to putting lighting on highways in Alberta outside of Calgary and Edmonton. It's like a disaster car pileup waiting to happen, especially with all of the trucks we have here. Like big semi-trucks and everything like that. They, for some reason, don't. And I was driving at like 6 a.m. The sun doesn't come out until like 9 a.m. here right now because it's winter time, basically. So for like 3 hours almost, I drove with fog and blackness with no lights, basically. And it added to the ambiance of this, for sure. So we follow our main character who all of a sudden gets this job at this kind of hotel spa sort of place it's got to be England area, just based on how they were talking. It's got to be like somewhere in the UK, but called Cold Thistle House, and she's supposed to just go like be a maid, and she's like, okay, this is upturn in all of my opportunities. I can get a job, I can maybe save, and like, you know, get like, you know, become something after the crappy upbringing she had at her original school. And her parents are not in the picture anymore, and her grandparents basically like gave her up. So she shows up to Cold Thistle. Cold Thistle's not what she thought it was. It's kind of like I want to say it's like a house of like H.H. Holmes and stuff, but it's this place that people are called to, and you find out why in the book they are called there. And there's supernatural elements to this, and she's now tied to the house by essentially showing up, and all of like the supporting staff, like the nurse, not the nurses, like the cleaners and the cooks and everything are also in on this whole thing. And the owner of Cold Thistle is like is it Dante and like the 12 levels of hell or whatever it is, or 7 levels of hell, 9 levels, whatever it is. There's a very heavy influences on that put in here. It was honestly interesting. I know as someone who doesn't generally read like horror genre stuff, then this was a bit of a surprise and out of my comfort zone. But I think if you enjoy like more faster paced or more supernatural leaning historical fictions, this would be something that I would actually recommend anyways. It was really, really interesting. I'm curious where the rest of the series is gonna go, because this whole thing, the main character has this moral like thing of like, is this is this okay? Like there's a lot of like it reminded me a lot of Swipe Right for Murder, where like the terrorist organization is like, they're killing off homophobes. You're like, you shouldn't ever do that. But I mean, if you're gonna kill someone, are those the worst people we're gonna get rid of? Like it was kind of yeah, it was honestly just really cool and weird. Definitely has more gothic tones in the writing, and I would honestly really highly recommend the audiobook as well, listening along to it. It was really good, creating the atmosphere and the background noises. It was actually really surprising, enjoyable read for me. I think I ended up giving it like a 4 out of 5 stars. I think I will continue on with this series too. And also, go back to the old book cover. Like, the chapter pages, they're so pretty. Like, why did you change it from this? Like, it's just, like, why would you get rid of this? Like, this whole, like, thing with the cover, and then, it was so good. Then I read The Psychology of Time Travel by Kate Mascarenhas. This I read it when I was having one of my, not great mental health days. So I thought that was interesting after I got to the end. This is very much talks about mental health, and how a government institution used it, and one of their staff essentially manipulated it once they realized that time travel was affecting the mental health well-being of their scientists that were doing the time traveling. So they had to initiate like a protocol and finding out how to early detect it, and how to vet people when they're coming in to see if they have existing mental health problems, so that they know not to send them through the time traveling machine, which they think can exacerbate that problem. This was just weird in a good way. When you look at books about time travel, this is very much less sci-fi-y. It still does play a part in it, but it's more about the organization around that was making time travel possible. And there is the main romance in this is honestly female, and they never identify, but there's very heavy hintings that the characters in that are both lesbians. So I thought this whole thing was interesting, and then getting some good diversity rep in there was also good. And then one of the characters, she's not one of the characters inside the actual time travel organization. She's essentially trying to get in. She is Black. And so we got a little bit of more diversity than I feel like we tend to get in most. I just like the last little bit. Any book about time travel has all of a sudden had diversity, which is good. I don't know what's all of a sudden changing, but it follows this government organization. I think it's again set in the United Kingdom, and the relationships is what really interested me. That this time jumping and the effect that it has on the relationships, and also the manipulation. They talked in one, there's a investigative journalist that explains it, that they get to essentially dictate when the government pays them. So they time travel. People will time travel to times when there's lower taxes, and then have the government pay them their salary. Which I was like, yeah, that'd be something rich people would do. That's 100% something rich people would do. And there's just a lot of cool, interesting things thrown in here. I think it's definitely a slower paced book overall. And I think, come for the time travel, I think I stayed because of the murder mystery element of it. But also seeing all of these different characters, not necessarily the relationships, which do play a role, but them as people, how them being in the organization that they are has affected their families and their relationships and their life as a whole. So in the end, a 3.5 or 4 out of 5 stars. I definitely enjoyed it. I'm glad I own it. And I think there are times when I would want to come back and reread this. And also female scientists, so yay! Then I read Salvation Day by Kaylee Wallace. This is kind of, yeah, I guess you could argue, yeah, it's a sci-fi. So it's this a whole, it's like if you took the Illuminae book trilogy and just isolated it to the outbreak on the space station. So there's a couple different characters, but essentially we're a part of, there's a cult of people who have been ostracized out of society. Basically, they're refugees and immigrants in our world. And this kind of cult leader comes in and promises them the world and all these things, so they start following him. Because the government in itself is not willing to help them. Very much like our current existing governments. We love to pull all these reasons as to why we can't help these people in need, that a lot of the time we put them in the situation. We enabled the world's problems. We enabled their country's civil wars or economic strifes to cause the refugee crisis. And then we're like, what are you talking about? We don't know. We had nothing to do with that. What are you talking about? And then we have a character whose mother was on this I don't want to say utopian, but it was this space station cloud thing in the sky where they were going to do all these scientific experiments, and it was going to be this hub for education and discovery and innovation. And something happened, and he was ejected from the spaceship when he was a young kid, and everyone on the ship died. And so the terrorist organization tries to infiltrate that existing hub. The government never told people what happened. They don't know that there was an illness on the ship. So, illness epidemic strikes up again. And one of the characters is originally from the terrorist organization that was sent in to essentially create the culty people were going to take over that space station and make it their new home, since the existing government that be isn't interested in helping them, and so they're going to help themselves. this is an interesting concept, and I put it in my Goodreads review, specifically. There's this quote at the end of the main character, who is ejected from the space station. When he's younger, he makes some comment at the end. It's honestly not a spoiler for the whole thing, but it's like, I never thought about all this stuff until it affected me. And it is that same, you remember that old wartime video of like, well, I'm a Mason, what's all of a sudden the issue? And he's like, and the guy beside him, after hearing some like preacher guy, he's like, oh, so it was okay when he was riding against the Jews and the gays and everyone else, but as soon as he targets you, it's an issue. And it is that thing, especially a big call out to immigration and refugee policies right now, honestly, that especially as people from the West, all of the stuff that has been going on in the Middle East and even Eastern Europe, we've caused a lot of that in our policies and everything that we did at the end of the World Wars, in climate change, and we love to just elect officials here that make us feel like, oh no, we didn't actually do that, and pretend that it didn't happen. And then there's other leaders around the world who are like, no, you have to do things. So it's really interesting that, again, we just had our election, and immigration is something in the last couple of years in Canada that has become quite a contentious thing. And I've even heard my friend who is actually an immigrant say things like, we're full up. No, we're not. As someone who lives in rural Alberta, there's lots of space up here. There's lots of space up here. What was that news article a little while ago that was like, I don't know how to explain to you that you should care about people. That's exactly what this is, just like in a sci-fi novel format. And I'm really impressed actually with it. I think the story itself was probably close to like a 4-star for me, 3.5, 4 stars. But I'm going to kind of keep an eye on this author, and I think it was nice to see sci-fi take that sort of political stance. Then I read Dark Dawn by J. Kristoff, the last in the Nevernight trilogy. It's over. I have to wait like a year now at least for Empires of the Vampire? Empire of the Vampire? Something like that. And then whenever the third book of the Lifelike series comes out. But like... Oh yeah, and then the Aurora Rising series. I don't know when J. Kristoff sleeps, actually. Honestly, I liked this as a conclusion. I'm just so sad it's over. Like, it was, I don't know. I loved everything that happened at the end of God's Grave. I also really actually liked the, like, very quick refresher of what happened in here at the very beginning. I really appreciated that, actually. I also love the narrator gets very sassy, like, even for the standards of this narrator. The narrator gets very sassy in this book. I don't know. Like, the series is just, like, something that's, it's gonna, like, have such vivid memories for me. Everything that happened in here, I feel like this book was consistent with the trilogy. I feel like this is J. Kristoff's baby of all his series. This is his baby. It blew up after Nevernight came out, and now people are trying to sell the UK hardcovers for, like, hundreds and hundreds of pounds online. And I think they were, J. Kristoff was insinuating they were going to do something about that, but they just never have. So I think they've just abandoned that for some reason, even though we would all buy it. This is just a very satisfying book. I don't know what to say other than that. It was just, if you like the rest of the series, I think you're going to like this. If you didn't, then I don't know why you would continue reading on with the series. Yeah, just Mia, and there's some sad parts in this. There's some happy parts in this, but Mia is just, like, such an iconic, like, she's, like, that iconic bisexual character for me that, like, of all the books that I've read, like, she's that character that when I'm, like, a bisexual main character, I'm like, oh, Mia from Nevernight. And then I think the last book that I read this week was Ruck by Sharon Cameron. This is a book that just kept getting recommended to me in a couple different places of, like, recommendation websites that I'm on. It's set in, like, a kind of, like, dystopian-y future. I feel like it takes parts and pieces of a lot of popular YA things. There's a little bit of, like, Robin Hood element to it. There's that whole, like, women doing things that men assume men would do, so they only look at male suspects, when it's actually a female doing all of, like, the robbing and all that stuff. I just think this is a book that we've all read before, and we've all read it when it was written better before. The characters were very flat. A lot of their voices blended together. Several times I had to stop and then be like, wait, hold on, who's talking again? which person are they? They weren't developed. None of their voices stood out from the others, even like the female and male characters. It felt very flat for me. It seemed also like the author was trying to do a lot in one book, and didn't do that good of a job. I also had a hard time differentiating parts of, because it is sort of a dystopian future, differentiating how the world is different now than it is in like the present time in the book. I think that needed a bit more explanation and fleshing out. And yeah, so in the end, like a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Thank gosh I have the library. And yeah, it just wasn't for me, unfortunately. So those are all the books that I read in the last couple weeks. We are back to regular scheduled videos, hopefully. And yeah, I will link all of these books in the description box down below. I will also link all of my social media. If you follow me, I will follow you back.